Hi guys, I'm Dan, this is Kai. We are the directors at Crescent Mortgages. If you're a first-time buyer hoping to buy your first home, then this is the place to start. The video is going to be talking you through the entire process. So right at the beginning, when you're thinking about buying a home and you need to know how to get started, all the way through to your property search, finding the right property, submitting the mortgage application, getting it approved, all the way through to the end of the process when eventually you get the keys and move into your new home. Make sure you stay tuned until the end as well, as we're going to be talking you through a really, really important bonus tip that everyone needs to be aware of. Okay guys, so before we jump into it, just to remind you, as always, that we are not YouTubers, we are mortgage brokers. So if you've got any questions or you need assistance with your mortgage or submitting your mortgage application, then you can contact us directly. So give us a call, send us an email, or just head over to the website. There should be a link popping up now. You can just send us an inquiry and we will come back to you. So we're going to be talking you through kind of from start to finish. So we've got a few different points here. I guess some are more important than others, but maybe let's just kind of start from the top. So again, not always a particular order, but I'd say the first thing that most people would start doing, maybe even before they've spoken with a mortgage professional, is to start saving a deposit, isn't it?
Yeah.
So why don't you just
explain that? Yeah. Okay. You're going to need a deposit. Most people probably know that, probably even you do watching this now, that you'll need a deposit when you buy a property. How much will vary quite drastically depending on where you are, but the minimum generally is 5% of the property value. More than that will just make things easier. Without going into loads of detail, 5% or more.
I should just touch on really quickly, we do have other videos that kind of touch on the similar topics to this in much more detail. But today it's kind of a little bit more, we're just going to touch on the important bits, just in case you don't have half an hour spare, because who does these days?
Not listening to us now.
Yeah.
But yeah, once you've got your deposit, or at least close to saving up as much deposit as you need, that's about it to take you into really the next step, I guess.
Realistically, until you've got kind of a decent chunk of a deposit saved, you're probably not going to be able to start the process. Although you can still speak to a mortgage professional if you want, just to find out how far away you are. But like Kai said, you can come up with a 5% deposit, but not every lender accepts that. So with every 5% more you put down, things do start to look better and better. But we appreciate that a huge deposit isn't possible for a lot of people. I guess once you're maybe underway with that, then the next stage, we would argue, as far as the first part of the process, is probably the most important. And it's speaking to a mortgage professional. We would advise a mortgage broker. You can speak to your bank, but obviously that is just one lender with one set of criteria and one set of products. If you speak to a mortgage broker, they have access to kind of mostly the whole market. So there's more lenders to choose from. What the mortgage broker, in terms of what they're going to do, they will normally have an initial consultation with you, and a lot will be covered in that consultation, won't it? So they're going to take some basic information from you, and at that point, the mortgage broker will basically start to give you advice and kind of piece together the puzzle of what's going to be achievable, and if you can start looking for properties, and when you can start looking for properties. They'll take some basic information from you around kind of what you earn, income, outgoings, do you have kids, current circumstances, and then they'll basically tell you, hopefully, yes, you can get a mortgage. And if so, how much you can borrow. So as you can imagine, your income and your outgoings will determine the maximum that lenders will be willing to give you. Once they've had that conversation, they will also provide a
agreement in principle?
Well done.
I wasn't sure if you were just...
It's
fine, yeah, an agreement in principle, which is basically normally a PDF document or a certificate, that says, I've spoken to a mortgage professional and I can get a mortgage of up to whatever the figure is. Your deposit then goes on top of that, and that creates effectively your ceiling as to property prices you can look for and offers you can make.
Yeah, so if your AIP certificate, agreement in principle certificate, says you could borrow up to £250,000 and you've got a £50,000 deposit, it means you could buy properties up to £300,000. That certificate is what you will use when you start looking for properties, because the estate agent will normally need to see that, but we'll come to that in a second. Anything else on this? So the conversation with the broker, what I will say is that is a really good opportunity for you to ask any questions you've got. So at that point, first time buyer, you're only first having the conversation with the mortgage broker, you probably aren't going to have a huge understanding of the process, which is completely fine, that's normal. So if you have any questions about the mortgage process, interest rates, the mortgage broker's service, how the application process works, any of that, as far as we're concerned, a decent broker should be able to answer all your questions at that stage. Obviously, within reason, there are some finer details which they'll probably want you to wait until you found a property, because otherwise you're using hypothetical figures. But generally, they should be able to cover any kind of answers and questions that you need to go through to kind of make sure that you're comfortable and reassured that now is the right time for you to start looking for a property. Providing that the broker has been able to send you a certificate, so they're happy that right now you could get a mortgage, and providing that you have your deposit saved, then in theory, well more than theory, in practicality, you could go and start looking for a property as soon as you're ready.
Yeah.
And that, I guess, is that the next part of the process?
I would say so, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, once you know you've got your money saved for a deposit, or at least most of it, you know what you can buy for, what you can't buy for, what your limits are.
Yeah.
So you get onto Rightmove or Zoopla or wherever it is you're looking for property and set your limits and start enjoying it.
You don't have to start looking straight away, but if you've got that certificate and you've got your deposit, you can start looking for properties as soon as you're ready. The property search varies in length. It might be that you go and fall in love with the first property that you've seen. It might be that you have to view 10, 15 properties and it takes months and months and months until you find somewhere. Bear in mind, once you do find a property that you like, you still have to make an offer on the property normally through the estate agent, and obviously your offer may not always be approved or agreed. So, you know, if there are other people offering on the property, then it might be that you find a property you love, but you're unsuccessful and you have to keep looking. And that obviously depends on your budget, you know, the properties that you're looking at, you know, are they affordable? And obviously how many people in the area are looking at similar properties, how much competition there is, which depends on the market at the time, doesn't it?
Yeah, I think when you look for property or view properties, I think generally speaking, you know, if you're in doubt, view them. It doesn't cost you anything other than some time, and even if you don't like a property, you might learn a little bit about when you're viewing, how to feel like you're viewing in the right way. There isn't a right or wrong way to do it.
How to feel comfortable speaking with a estate agent. Sometimes that can be a bit daunting for some people.
Yeah, it can be a bit confrontational almost if you're asking how to get money off.
We actually made, I think it was only kind of a 10 or so minute video on basically on this specifically, so on viewing properties, offering on properties, negotiating on properties. So that is actually really, really helpful if you are at the point where you're going to start looking. So again, links should be popping up on the screen now. So when you're ready, have a little look at that one, and that will kind of hopefully give you a bit more confidence when you start viewing properties. Once we have kind of touched on it, once you found the property that you love, and you've kind of gone through, you maybe looked at the property a few times, you're happy that it's within budget, then you make an offer on a property through the estate agent. They pass that on to the seller might agree it straight away, they might try and negotiate, it's all very normal. And once it's been verbally agreed and they're happy to accept the offer that you've made, that's when the mortgage process starts. Now what I would say is, up until the point where we've got to now, you as the client will probably have a bit more involvement, won't they? You know, we need you to kind of save your deposit, you're going to be having conversations with the broker, you're going to be physically looking for properties, you have to do most of that on your own. Once your offer's been accepted, the next part of the process, you will obviously have involvement and you'll be kind of kept in the loop, but your mortgage broker, solicitor, other parties will probably have a bit more involvement and you might take a little bit more of a back step.
Yeah, it's just kind of where everyone else starts to take the reins a little bit.
Yeah. So once the offer's been accepted, that is when we start the mortgage process. So that's when you submit the mortgage application. Until then, we can obviously discuss mortgages, but we won't actually get the process underway until the offer's been accepted by the seller on the property. Once the mortgage process is underway, so do you want to just touch on a little bit about what will happen once they've made the successful offer?
Well, I guess the first thing to do is get back in touch with whoever you're looking for your mortgage. So if that's your mortgage broker you had a really good conversation with, a week ago, months ago, just get in touch with them and they will talk you through the process. But really it's now about figuring out what you need from this mortgage.
Yeah, so what are you talking through, kind of what, if they contact us, if we're acting on their behalf,
so if you got,
what we would do?
Yeah, if you got back in touch, we would then arrange another call or meeting or whatever it is with you, and we'd start talking about what you need. What do we need out of this? So we'd go through, we don't need to go through all the information again, we'd already have your income, your expenditure, etc. on file, but we start asking for a few things. We'd ask for documents, so it might be pay slips, it might be self-employed documents for those that are self-employed, bank statements, proof of deposit, things like that. We're also then going to start talking about type of mortgages, so fixed rates, variable rates, how long, fixing for 2 years, 5 years, pros and cons, mortgage terms, all these little specifics, how much you actually need to borrow. Get all of that ready and start preparing a recommendation for which lender we think is best for you. And that's a phone call, and then possibly one more after that, depending on how you like to communicate with people.
And then kind of simultaneously with that process, you will also need to find a solicitor. So probably the two most important parts of the buying process are obviously your mortgage broker, getting the mortgage approved, and your solicitor, they have a really, really important role in the process, don't they? They're going to be the ones overseeing the purchase, overseeing the legal side, communicating with the seller's solicitor, and ultimately getting you to the point where you can get the keys and move into the property. Once you've had those conversations, within a kind of a day or two, maybe of having your offer accepted, we want to be in a position where you are submitting your mortgage application after your broker's talked you through the different lenders and different mortgage options, and you've kind of narrowed down what your preference is, and instructing your solicitor. So the legal work and the mortgage application will kind of move forward simultaneously. The mortgage is normally agreed relatively quickly, isn't it? Could be agreed within a week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks. Could be more, could be less, but somewhere around that with a decent fast lender. It's the legal work that takes longest, isn't it? So the entire process from when you find the property to when you get the keys could take about 4 months, can be a bit more, can be a bit less, but I'd say that's kind of a pretty good idea. And that most of that is the legal work, isn't it?
It is, yeah, it is. And even if you've got the best solicitor around, you've gone really quickly, your broker, if everything you're in's gone perfectly, the other side might not. They might come for a cheap solicitor that's really slow.
So some things are just out of our hands, out of your hands. So that the process kind of realistically does take time. Even if everyone was ridiculously quick and then there were no hurdles, it would be very unusual to see a purchase go through in less than 2 months, wouldn't it?
Yeah, that's normally best case scenario. If it's really clean, everything goes perfect.
As we've said, from that point, so when the mortgage process and the legal process are underway, you won't have as much involvement because your mortgage broker will be kind of dealing with the mortgage lender for you. They'll be sending documents, they'll be answering questions, they'll be resolving potential issues along the way. They'll only they'll only concern you with that if they really need to. The idea of a mortgage broker is to kind of take away as much of the work and stress from you as possible. And then the solicitor, don't be alarmed if you don't hear from the solicitor for weeks and weeks and weeks throughout the process. They're just doing their work in the background. Most solicitors are not going to send you daily or weekly updates, are they?
No.
Obviously, it varies. If you pay a lot of money for a Rolls-Royce solicitor, you might get more updates. But for a lot of people, that isn't necessary, is it? For the 3 or 4 month process.
Particularly at the start. At the start, things go quite slowly, and as it gets closer to the end, you'll find you probably have more dialogue with the solicitor as you're getting closer to the line.
So once the mortgage is kind of fully approved and the legal work is pretty much complete, we haven't missed anything, have we? When you check the notes,
valuations. But we weren't going to go into that, I don't think.
No, that's within the mortgage process, which we've touched on in another video, so that's fine. You can obviously throughout the process you can organise a private survey as well, which again we've touched on in other videos. It's not a mandatory part of the process, but once that's all agreed and the solicitors have confirmed that all of the legal work is done, they will then prepare you for an exchange date, which is when you sign the contract and the seller signs the contract to legally commit to the sale. And at that point, you're kind of legally committed. If you were to pull out at that point, you're probably in breach of contract, and the same with the seller. And then normally a few days, a week, maybe give or take, after exchange is completion, isn't it? And that's when you get the keys and you become the legal owner and you can move into the property as soon as you're ready. I think that's kind of, again, there are other videos where we go into more detail, but we just want to slightly, I mean, how long do you think we've been going now? We're dragging out again?
16 minutes.
Okay, we'll check that. So once that's all done, then you can move into the property, and that's the stress over until maybe in a few years' time when you start to look at the remortgage. Obviously, your mortgage broker will contact you to assist with that. Bonus tip. So we did promise a bonus tip. Now, to be honest, this is something that your mortgage broker will discuss with you. Probably they should.
We will.
I mean, if they don't, that's crazy, really,
bad,
isn't it? They'll touch on it when you're first looking for a property, and they'll definitely discuss it once you've found a property and you're applying for the mortgage, because it is something that needs to be decided. And it's your mortgage term. So it's how long you spread out the entire mortgage balance. Now, this is important. I guess the main reason this is important is because it's one of the only ways that you as the client can manipulate what your mortgage payment will be. So there are other parts and other decisions throughout the mortgage process that you're not going to have much sway, really. So if you're buying a property for 300,000, you're putting 50,000 down and you've got no more deposit, that's the maximum you can put down, and you're picking a 2-year fix. We can find you the best 2-year fix on the market that you're eligible for, but there's no negotiation there, is there?
No.
You can't just say to the lender, oh, can you not 0.2% off the interest rate? It doesn't work like that. So you have to pay that interest rate, pay that interest on that particular mortgage balance, and that will equal a certain mortgage payment each month. Everyone coming into a mortgage will have a budget that they're aiming for their mortgage payment. So you'll look through, you'll work out what your other bills are gonna be, obviously council tax, life insurance, utilities, that kind of stuff. And then you'll work out, okay, we think we can pay £1,000 a month on our mortgage, or £1,500 a month on our mortgage, whatever it is. Now, you can play around with that figure using the mortgage term.
Yes.
So, like I say, that's how long you spread out the mortgage balance. In terms of the kind of the common mortgage terms, I mean, a lot of people come in thinking 25 years is quite common, although this day and age with increasing...
It's been a long time since that's felt
yeah,
normal.
it's normally a bit higher, isn't it?
Yeah, it used to be 25 years. Most people now seem to default anywhere from 35 to 40. And this is what, we're 25?
Yeah.
Yeah. Probably since 2022.
Yeah, maybe, yeah. So
around then, it kind of 35, 40 years feels like almost people default to that now.
Yeah.
Sometimes wrongly.
If we start with the middle ground, so let's say your mortgage term is 30 years.
Yep.
That will give you a certain mortgage payment. Let's say that gives you a mortgage payment of £1,200 a month. If you think £1,200 a month is affordable, and that's kind of roughly the monthly budget that you were aiming for, then 30 years is probably the right term for you. If £1,200 a month is too expensive, and if you have a chat with your partner and you think, do you know what, you only wanted to spend, £1,000, £1,100 a month, then you can extend the mortgage term, like I said, to 35 years. I mean, it doesn't have to be 5 yearly increments. It could be 31 years, 33 years, 35 years. Some lenders will even go up to 40 years, although that is generally the maximum.
Yeah.
And by extending that mortgage term, it will reduce your mortgage payment. And your mortgage broker can give you a few different options to kind of show you what your mortgage payment will be, and you can pick the term that suits you. Changing the mortgage term is not going to change the lender, it's not going to change the scheme, it's not going to change the interest rate. All it will do is change your monthly payment because of how long you're spreading out the debt.
Yep.
However, the only downside to extending the mortgage term, yes, it looks more attractive because your mortgage payments are lower, but you will ultimately pay more interest because you have your mortgage over a longer period, and you'll have a mortgage to an older age. So there is a catch to extending the term. What a lot of people do is start with a longer term just to keep your payments down to start with, and you're not committed to that. You can always reduce that term or overpay on the mortgage from the start to clear the mortgage quicker. So there is flexibility to clear it quicker, even if you want to start with a longer term.
Yeah. And I guess just to finish the example, if 1,200 was the payment, but actually you thought 1,500 is what our budget was, then you can come down in term to 25 years or 20 years.
Yeah.
As a default, the shorter the term, the better.
Yeah.
So if you can squeeze the term down, brilliant. But if you can't, it isn't then fixed, as Dan said, at 30, 35, 40 years. It doesn't have to stay there. It might be you settle and change that over time. But get it to your budget.
When you say the shorter the term, the better, which obviously there are other factors within your life, but in terms of financially.
Purely you save more money in interest.
The amount of interest you pay, the shorter the term, the less interest you'll pay overall, and your mortgage will be cleared at a younger age, which obviously isn't a bad thing for anyone, is it? So have that conversation with your broker. They'll give you a few options. You might want to just commit to a short term where you have high payments, but you get it cleared as quickly as you can. You might want a longer term with smaller payments, just to take the pressure off for the first few years of your mortgage. You can always overpay and clear it quicker. So really, really important one, but your mortgage broker will talk you through that. I think that's everything.
I thought you forgot something.
No, I don't think so. Well, probably. But guys, thanks for watching. Like I say, if you have any questions, you can get in touch, and we'll see you next time. Thanks a lot.